take your seats. We are starting the show.
At Car Global,
we make wholesale easy
so our customers can be more successful.
I make wholesale easy with the largest, most transparent digital marketplace.
With data that empowers actionable insights and better decisions.
With a fast, simple, and smooth customer experience.
I make wholesale easy with faster cycle times.
With floor plans, solutions that make sense.
With technology that's modern, intuitive, and intelligent.
With fast and efficient logistics.
With on-site reconditioning.
I make wholesale easy with AI-powered inspections.
We make wholesale easy. We make wholesale easy.
We make wholesale easy.
So our customers.
So you can be more successful.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Those of you that are here in Vegas, take your seats. Those of you that are watching us virtually, you can do whatever you want. But once again, thanks to all of you for taking the time to spend time with us here at the Conference of Automotive Remarketing. I mentioned I'm Charlie Vogelheim. I'll be your MC throughout the rest of today and tomorrow. Very much looking forward to talking to you, seeing you. And I know it's been a long 15 months since we all got together, and we're so thankful that the Bobbitt Group took the time to bring us all together for this event. Again, both in person and virtually. I can only imagine how blank your 15 months were without hearing the word Gonzaga from my lips. So there it is. Now it's done. We can move on, I think. I'm very excited about this next presentation. You saw just a little bit of a snippet, and thanks to Car Global for their sponsorship and participation in the Conference of Automotive Remarketing throughout the years. And our keynote session is a vision of the auctions of tomorrow with Peter Kelly. Now, I mentioned to you to download the app for the phone. There's a great bio on Peter in that, and I've got a lot of it here. He is the CEO of Car. But rather than read all of this, I want to introduce Peter in the way that I first met him, which was many years ago, back in before the last millennial, 1999, grad student at Stanford University. And this thing called the internet had just come out a couple years before. And we met. I was the editor at Kelley Blue Book at the time, experimenting with the internet and talking about what that really meant on the remarketing side. Not just providing information as we did at Blue Book with values and such, but what business could come from all that. Very educated man. It was very enlightening for me to have the conversations with you way back then, Peter. Come on up on stage. Let's have a nice warm welcome to the CEO of Car, Mr. Peter Kelly.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yes. And we didn't name the Blue Book after you. So remember.
That has the extra E.
Yeah, that has an E.
So there you go. With the spelling of that.
And this is all set for you, sir.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, again, thanks, Charlie. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to Bobbitt Publications for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. And it's great to be here in person. Great to see you all. And for those that are here on remotely, great to have you join us as well. So good afternoon, everybody. We're here today to talk about the future of our industry. And, the last time that Car convened in person, I think, it was more than 2 years ago. I think it was 27 months ago. And for sure, the world was a very different place back then. We've all seen a tremendous amount of change, probably more change than I'd say most of us or all of us might have imagined. But rather than reflecting too much on what's transpired, I'd rather spend some time on the topic of where do we go from here? What does the future look like? And I guess as a starting point, I'd say I don't think any of us expect that everything will go back to exactly how it was, right? I think we all recognize some of these changes are permanent, but it's also possible that each of us has a different view as to what the future might hold. So for the next 20, 25 minutes, I'd like to share some of my perspectives on that. And Charlie, I think we'll have some Q&A at the end of this. So with that, we'll jump right in. And if you look at the agenda, or if you look at the screen, the topic says a vision for the auctions of tomorrow. I'm going to suggest right at the start that we broaden our perspective a little bit and change that title. I'm suggesting we think about a vision for the marketplace of tomorrow. And you might ask, well, why even make that change? Isn't it the same thing? Isn't it just semantics? And I would argue that it's not. I think there's an important difference here. So when we think about our business at the highest level, used vehicle remarketing, What we do at the end of the day is we take a vehicle that somebody owns, some entity owns, that they no longer want, and we remarket that or sell that to a business, a dealership typically, who wants that vehicle to build up inventory for their business. Sellers want to liquidate an asset or a vehicle, and buyers want to acquire that vehicle. And that ultimately is what we're doing, is connecting sellers and buyers so that they can do business, and that by definition is a marketplace. And I guess when I think of it in those terms, yeah, it's true, an auction is one kind of marketplace. And it's a very important kind of marketplace, particularly in our industry, but it's not the only kind. And I believe that as we look to the future, if we only think of our industry in terms of auction, then we will have too narrow a view and we'll miss out on opportunities. So that's why I'm suggesting we take a broader look and think of it in terms of marketplace. So if we think about this marketplace of tomorrow, this marketplace of the future, what does it look like? And I would make the case, I'll say it personally, I believe that this marketplace of the future will be principally digital in nature. And by which I mean our customers, our buyers and sellers, will principally transact on digital platforms. Now, I didn't say exclusively, but principally. I think most of the transactions in our marketplace of the future will take place on digital platforms. And why is that? I think the bottom line is, I believe it will make sense for sellers and buyers to do business with each other that way. Because digital marketplaces will ultimately lead stronger business outcomes via a better and simpler customer experience for buyers and sellers alike. And then you might ask, well, what are those better outcomes? What are those things that they benefit from that they mightn't get through a different approach? And I would say some of the things are as follows: 24/7 liquidity in the marketplace, unconstrained by time or location, a broader geographic reach for your inventory, or a broader geographic reach of the inventory that you might want to search from if you're a buyer, more eyes on the car if you're a seller, and a greater selection if you're a buyer, faster cycle times and reduced days to sale, and ultimately higher proceeds and safer outcomes. And I think those are the principal advantages that this digital marketplace of the future will deliver. Furthermore, I'd go further and say, I think this future is pretty much inevitable. It's just a matter of time and opportunity. And I'd say this change really is happening right now, and has been happening pre-COVID, but was really massively accelerated through COVID. So I think we're well into the construction phase, and we're seeing the positive results play out across our industry. So let me give you an example of this before I go too much further. And Charlie, you mentioned this already. 20 years ago, I did start a business called OpenLane. And OpenLane is not really an auction. Okay? It is a digital marketplace enabled by technology. And it's one that's geared principally for captive finance companies and for franchise dealers. Well, in the most recent month, last month, May, the sellers who used OpenLane to sell off-lease inventory sold 80% of that inventory on that platform. And if you think about what that really means, it means that one digital platform sold 4 times as much inventory, of off-lease inventory for those customers than all of the physical auctions in the United States combined. And that is unprecedented, just to be clear, at that level. And I would also say it's a little scary. I'm not sure it's the right percentage, but it's a fact. That's what actually happened. I could also make a similar analogy in the dealer-to-dealer space with a business we acquired last year, Backlot Cars. And for those of you that don't know what Backlot Cars is, it's a digital dealer-to-dealer marketplace. And it works like this. A seller, who's typically a franchise dealer, has a vehicle for sale, and we send out an inspector who's actually a trained automotive mechanic to inspect that vehicle. As soon as the vehicle is inspected, it's immediately loaded up into the Backlot Cars marketplace. And buyers from any location in the lower 48 states can view that vehicle and make offers on it. And there's a bid offer process back and forth. Again, not an auction necessarily, but a marketplace. And the car sells. And once the car sells, we deliver directly from the seller to the buyer. So again, as I said, Backlot Cars is not an auction. It's a digital marketplace. It's geared for franchise dealers on the sell side and independent dealers on the buy side. And I will say that Backlot and other businesses like it compete with the traditional auction model. And they're growing fast and they're selling a lot of vehicles. So we need to be very mindful of these types of choices that our customers have today, particularly when those choices are delivering powerful results. So I'd like to pivot here and talk a little bit about liquidity. At the end of the day, as marketplaces, the principal value we provide both sellers and buyers is liquidity. And I think there's fundamental differences between the liquidity in the physical ecosystem as we have understood it and the liquidity offered in a digital ecosystem as we have it today. So I'll use an analogy here. You know, one of the biggest digital marketplaces on the planet, perhaps the biggest, is Amazon. Okay? And it's probably a safe assumption that I'd say most people in this room have purchased something on Amazon. So you know the experience. You go to Amazon, the website or the app, you have a product in mind, you search for the product, you find it, you perhaps read a couple of the reviews, you look at the price, you look at the time for delivery, and let's say you're ready to buy. And then Amazon tells you come back on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, it'll be offered up for sale as number 37 on the run list. Well, you know, we all know that last part doesn't happen because as a consumer you wouldn't come back to Amazon if that was the case. But we in our industry have that experience for our dealers all the time. We ask our sellers to wait until next Wednesday to sell the car, and we ask our dealers to wait until they can buy it. So, you know, I'm just making a point there that when we operate in a principally physical model, the liquidity of our marketplace was constrained to a particular time in a particular place. Typically, this was the morning of the sale or the day of the sale and at the location of the sale. And to illustrate this, I'm going to show here, this is an analysis of all the bids placed at, here we go. This is all the bids placed at one ADESA auction for one of our sales pre-COVID. This was a Wednesday sale. And you can see that, you know, not surprisingly, all of the bidding activity takes place, most of the bidding activity takes place essentially on that day, with very little bidding taking place over the rest of the week. And this is a pattern you see at pretty much all physical auctions, not just ADESA auctions. So I think one way of thinking about this is a marketplace that has a certain pulse, and that pulse beats about once per week. That's the way I would think about that as a marketplace. The bidding is principally once per week, and it is quite geographically constrained. Most of those bids took place at the location of the sale, and some of them took place by dealers participating virtually from further away. Now, a digital marketplace is quite different. It has a fundamentally different heartbeat. In a digital marketplace model, the liquidity, you know, is not constrained by geography and not constrained by time. And that leads to something that's much more akin to a 24/7, always-on marketplace. And the result of that, ultimately, is that vehicles can move faster through that process. And that's a value to both our sellers and buyers. It also offers, because of the lower geographic constraint, the potential for a more optimum allocation of the inventory from the seller to the buyer, getting the right car to the right buyer. We're going to talk about that as well in a sec. So to illustrate this, I'm going to show with you all of the offers made last week on backlot cars. So you'll see here, compared to the slide we just looked at, the difference is quite obvious. The digital platform has removed the time boundary. So offers are coming in every single day of the week. They're happening at times that are convenient for the customer. In fact, if you notice, you might see at the end of each day there's a little uptick, which is really customers, you know, closing out their business typically from home. You'll see offers overnight. In fact, it never really goes to zero. So again, through this more digital model, we see the marketplace has transitioned to a more faster pulse, 24/7 type experience that offers value to the sellers and the buyers. The second thing I want to talk about related to that is the expanded geographic reach. Digital marketplaces broaden geographic reach. There's no doubt about that. They increase the audience that can see and potentially purchase every vehicle that a seller offers for sale. Fundamentally, they reduce the cost to the buyer of engaging in the sale. And that, in sort of marketplace lingo, is reducing the search costs. Because the buyer's search costs are lowered, they don't have to go in person. They can now engage in much more auctions. They can engage more broadly. And we see this all the time. Buyers engage more auction, and they have a greater opportunity to find the inventory that's right for them, not just the inventory that happens to be at that sale today. And because of this dynamic, sellers get to have either more eyeballs on the car or more of the right eyeballs on the car. And this ultimately can lead to a more optimum allocation of the vehicle between the seller and the buyer. And again, we're absolutely seeing this play out in our business today and through COVID. At ADESA, for example, cross-state bidding by a buyer in one state for a vehicle in a different state has more than doubled, has almost doubled, up 93% since we went all digital just over a year ago. And on backlot cars, we find that 80% of the vehicles that we sell into a different market. Now, I don't mean a different state, I mean a different market. So selling from Dallas into Fort Worth, or selling from Dallas into Houston, that would be into a different market. So let's just put some visuals on this, because I think you'll find these pretty powerful. I'm going to start with ADESA. So what we're looking at here on this first slide is one seller selling in one lane on one day at one of our auctions. Okay? So think of it as one lane, one seller, one day, one auction. And this is pre-COVID. So what we're showing here is, out of that sale, which was Flint, Michigan, where did those vehicles go to? Where did the buyers sort of dial in from, and where did the vehicles end up being purchased from? And again, we see a pretty nice distribution of vehicles. And that was we were generally relatively pleased with that outcome. Again, pre-COVID, that was January of last year. Now, if we look at the same sale, the same seller, the same week, and roughly the same number of vehicles, almost exactly the same number of vehicles, January of this year, we see a much broader distribution of vehicles and a much broader geographic reach. Okay? The average distance that the vehicle is being delivered has more than doubled. And the number of states represented as buying vehicles from that sale has also more than doubled compared to a year ago. Now, again, I know there are some market effects, and some might say that that was part of it. And I would agree that probably was part of it. But again, this was January, before we had maybe some of the even larger effects that we've seen of late. And I would say that all of this is enabled through digital in any case. This can only happen through digital platforms. So I think this is powerful stuff. With more potential bidders and more of the right bidders looking at the inventory, sellers can be more confident that they're getting the best outcome on their vehicle. And for buyers, they have the opportunity to, again, select the vehicles that are best for them, not just what happens to be running down that lane in front of them. However, this image, powerful as it is, I think just starts to tell the story. I'm going to show you now what we're seeing on backlot cars. So in this example, this is a little bit different cut of the data, but what this is we're showing all the vehicles that originated in Texas over a 90-day period that were purchased by buyers outside of Texas. So this is vehicles originating in Texas, selling to buyers that weren't in Texas over a 90-day period in 2021. And let me start by saying the obvious. First of all, Texas is a big state. The reason I picked Texas is that it is, in fact, the biggest state. So you would expect in a big state, more of the vehicles will sell within the state, right? Texas is a big market. And that's true. Most of the vehicles we originate in Texas sell in Texas, but 40% of them sell to buyers outside of Texas. And that is a considerably higher percentage than we see selling out of state from our auctions in Texas. Similar vehicles, I should say, dealer consigned vehicles. These are dealer consigned vehicles selling in Texas. Okay? So a much more significant out-of-state percentage, probably double compared to what we typically see. And if we double-click into those vehicles that are leaving the state of Texas, what we're seeing is the average distance they're moving is 711 miles, and that's the average distance. That means a lot of them are moving twice that distance. And these are not super high-value vehicles. These are an average price of $9,000. Okay? So, what this tells me is that, buyers outside of Texas are finding that it makes sense for them to move those vehicles to pretty much every state in the lower 48. And again, that's the power of a digital marketplace. So when I see images like this or images like the prior one, this sort of leads me to conclude that these types of benefits will be telling in the long run for our customers. And that's why the future of our industry will principally be a digital marketplace. And also I'd say, while I know that not all customers are on board yet, I do think there's a lot of customers sort of recognizing these types of benefits and seeing it play out in their own business. I want to talk a little further about the speed. This is another aspect of a digital marketplace benefit. When you combine 24/7 liquidity with expanded geographic reach, the result is a more efficient allocation and disposal of the assets from start to finish. As soon as a vehicle is ready, again, backlot cars, it can be offered up in the marketplace, and bids come in immediately. And the expression I actually heard from one of our sellers was, it's just like the bids seem to start flying in. It's pretty powerful stuff, because the buyers are attuned and waiting. More eyeballs on it, faster, 24/7. This leads to reduced days to sale. And the data confirms this. On OpenLane, our upstream platform for off-lease vehicles, the average days to sale recently has been as low as 1.1 days. And on our dealer-to-dealer marketplace, backlot cars, pretty much the same number. The cars are selling on average in 1.1 days. And we know that the days to sale at auctions are somewhat longer than that. So digital is faster, meaning sellers can have the potential to realize a return on their assets even faster than before. And there's an expression I've heard in this industry that your first money is your best money. And it seems to me that digital platforms at least give you the opportunity to get that first money even sooner than ever before. So how do all these benefits add up? When we reduce search costs, expand geographic reach, expand the pool of potential buyers, do a better job of matching the right car to the right buyer, speed the process, all of that should translate into higher proceeds. And indeed, the data also seems to support this. We're seeing very strong vehicle values and very strong seller returns with the same price retention or better as traditional channels. And finally, there's the issue of safety. There's no question, but digital marketplaces also enhance safety. And I know that safety is important to everybody in this room. And I know that all of the auction operators in this room have done a tremendous job enforcing and improving safety at their auctions. And I think they all deserve to be commended for that. But the simple reality is, as you can see in this picture, is when you have people in close proximity to moving vehicles, that introduces an element of risk, whether we like it or not, no matter how good our processes are. And that creates a risk of accidents and a risk of injury, and we all know that's a fact. And again, the data for the last 15 months at CAR shows us at CAR what we already intuitively knew to be the case, that digital is in fact safer. With fewer vehicle movements, that's less interactions between customers, employees, and vehicles. That's reduced risk, and that's reduced accidents. So that ultimately is better for sellers, buyers, and employees alike. So again, a win-win-win from a safety standpoint for everybody. So all of these things together, again, like I said, the safety, the proceeds, the speed, the reach, the 24/7, lead me to conclude that our industry of the future, our industry of tomorrow, will principally be a digital in nature. So you might be wondering, in this vision of the future, what happens to physical auctions? And that's a very good question, and that's where I want to go next. And the short answer is that I believe physical infrastructure and physical facilities will be a critically important part of our industry's future. I believe that to achieve their full potential, the most powerful digital marketplaces will need to operate on top of a nationwide, and I think it has to be nationwide, network of physical facilities. Now, I think the role of these physical facilities, these physical assets, will evolve and change. But the physical facilities themselves will be a vital, critical part of achieving the overall power of the marketplace. So I mentioned we expect to see change. So what's the nature of that change? My expectation is that the physical infrastructure in our industry will evolve from more of a physical auction centered around an in-person sale day event, which is what it was, into more of a vehicle logistics center model to process vehicles, to image, store, recondition, repair, transport vehicles that are then offered for sale on the digital marketplace. I used the Amazon analogy earlier, so I'd like to go back to Amazon for a second. As I said, Amazon is a digital marketplace. As customers, we engage with Amazon through a digital platform. But I would argue that Amazon is not just a digital marketplace. In order to fulfill its brand promise, Amazon leverages a vast, vast network of facilities and logistics to deliver on the customer promise. And I think the same analogy holds true in our industry. Digital platforms underpinned by a nationwide network of physical facilities. I think that's going to be the secret to success in this marketplace of the future. So I talked about vehicle logistics centers. So what are those really? I believe, again, they're going to look, to all intents and purposes, like what we have today as a physical auction, a large facility with thousands or tens of thousands of vehicles and all the capabilities that we have today, but less centered around a sale day event, because the sale function will tend to be moving in a more digital direction. Instead, these vehicle logistics centers will become very focused on activities like receiving vehicles, inspecting vehicles, imaging vehicles, reconditioning, repairing, mechanical and body work, and obviously the logistics, and the logistics of getting the vehicle through that process. I think they'll be very focused on streamlined operations and focusing more on things like faster throughput, process quality, reduced cycle times. I think those are already key metrics for our sellers. I think there'll be even more key metrics in the future. I also think we may see increased investment and capabilities when it comes to making vehicles ready for sale, and in particular, potentially making vehicles ready for retail sale. And that's not something our industry has been super focused on in the past, but I think with the changing paradigm around how used vehicles get retailed, either by dealers or by other parties, I think our auctions of the past, or vehicle logistics centers of the future, will play an increased role in getting vehicles retail ready as well. And we're already seeing that actually starting to play out with sellers and buyers in our ecosystem today. In fact, we're already seeing vehicles retail ready and staged for direct delivery to retail customers at our facilities. So, as I said, I believe that in the future, many, many millions of vehicles will continue to be sold from these physical facilities, the vehicle logistics centers of tomorrow. And to enable the sale of these on-premise vehicles, the most successful and most vibrant marketplaces will need to have a broad network of those facilities capable of receiving, inspecting, imaging, reconditioning, marshalling, transporting vehicles. And they'll be built around speed, efficiency, and quality of their processes. And sellers that need to avail of storage for their vehicles, or have vehicles that they believe and the data suggests need that reconditioning work to achieve their full value potential, will be delivered and processed at those facilities. And obviously we welcome that business. But I also expect that in addition to that, we will see many, many millions of vehicles sold through an off-premise model. Vehicles that do not come to our facilities. And for these many millions of vehicles, the most successful and vibrant marketplaces will need to be able to project their capabilities, particularly inspection and logistics, out into the field to wherever that vehicle is. Inspect it where it is, sell it from where it is, and move it once. And sellers who have space and storage, or for whom the data suggests there isn't value in investing in reconditioning of their vehicle, may reduce costs by availing of that type of model. And we welcome that also. Not only is that a vision of the future, we're actually seeing that trend already play out across our business. As our industry has migrated to more digital transactions, the portion of vehicles at car, so again, open lane, backlot, etc., sold through an off-premise model has continued to grow. And it was growing pre-COVID and continued to grow through COVID, and is now more than 50% of all the vehicles we sell. But the bottom line is, whether it's an on-premise sale or an off-premise sale, the beauty is the customer gets to decide. It's not us that decide that, it's the customer, buyer and seller, through their preferred way of engaging in the marketplace that will drive that percentage within our business. I want to talk for a brief moment about data. One of the things we talk about a lot when we talk about digital transformation is data, and how opportunities to leverage data will drive the digital future. There are many examples of this, but one of the things I find talking about data is it's easy to lose the audience. Just thought I'd share one example of what we're doing at Odessa to kind of give you guys a sense of this. And again, think about the vehicle logistics center of the future, and we got a vehicle coming in. We call this product Smart Seller Reconditioning. So here's how this works. A vehicle is checked in at one of our vehicle logistics centers. It's immediately inspected, and based on that condition report, our data-driven operation systems, the technology, can immediately provide a menu of possible repair items to the seller. And these are provided as a line item, so 4 or 5 line item activities that could be done on this vehicle. In addition to the cost of that item, we can also provide an estimate of the increased proceeds that will be delivered if that investment is made. And we can assess, again, through the technology in an automated way, what combination of those 5 items, is it numbers 1 and 4 or 1, 2, and 5, that will deliver the maximum value and the maximum ROI for that seller. All of this can be presented to the seller in real time, and the seller can either accept that recommendation or, through the interface, select a different combination of work that they want to have done on the vehicle. But the critical point here is that the seller will have the information at their fingertips, as well as an indication of what the value and condition grade impact is if you make that change. So this is something that's been in pilot at our company here over the last number of months. And you know what we've seeing some very positive results. For vehicles in the pilot, the average lift in wholesale value is just over $900 based on the work done. And the work done to achieve that was about $440 worth of work. So almost, or just over a 2 to 1 return on investment, which I think is a good return. And again, whether that holds in the long term or not, I guess we will see. But I think the point I'm making here is this is an example of how we integrate technology, data, physical processes, digital marketplaces into this vision of tomorrow. So the title of the keynote was a vision for the marketplace of tomorrow. Not the future. Tomorrow is just less than 24 hours away. And that was important. That word choice was important. You know, what I described here today, you know, I think it's already in front of us. I think our industry is really starting to engage in this way already. This is not some abstract prediction that might take place 10 years from now. I think the groundwork has been laid. And again, as I said, I think our industry's transformation to a principally digital marketplace in the future is almost inevitable. It's just a matter of when and how. You know, I've said how I think the facilities will remain critical and how data will be a key unlock to delivering the success for the seller and buyer. So that's kind of the vision as I see it of the future. And I think when I think about my role in our company, you know, one key question in my mind is, do you embrace that change and lean into that and help shape that future? Or do you try to hold out until the tide pulls you forward? You know, and I guess, you know, one thing I've learned over my 20-some years, as Charlie mentioned, is that the future comes whether we like it or not. The bottom line is there isn't one person in this room that can make that future happen, and neither is there one person in this room that can hold it back. Tomorrow will come in spite of us, but it surely will come. And the other thing I think about when I think about change is I often think of it as a mental image as just a two-sided coin. One side of the coin is risk. You know, change brings risk, but it also brings opportunity. And I think you can have a much more successful business if you focus on that opportunity side and embrace the change. Because at the end of the day, there is opportunity everywhere. There's a lot of opportunity in that vision I talked about. So I guess my hope for this group here and for everybody across our industry is I really hope this industry of tomorrow brings opportunity for all of us, and that we all have the good fortune to embrace it. I hope it will yield stronger outcomes all around for all of us. For sure, I think it will. I believe it will yield stronger outcomes for our customers. And that's not to say that anything we did in the past was wrong. I don't want anybody to interpret that for a moment as the case. I would argue that, on the contrary, what we did in the past was right. What we did in the past and the way we operated our businesses, that was the right fit for the times. But the times have changed. So I'm going to leave you with one final thought. You know, when I took over the role at Carr, when I took over my role at Carr, you know, I realized this was going to be a new and interesting professional challenge for me. Leading an organization of 10,000 people through a time of pretty tremendous change would be what I would characterize it as. And something that was very much on my mind as I took on that role a few months ago was this idea of alignment. You've got a team of 10,000 people. What can I and the rest of the leadership team do to increase alignment? How can we make sure that our team understands the vision of where we're trying to go? And how can we make sure that everybody is sort of pulling in the same direction? And this led us to consider as a team the concept of purpose. I heard Charlie talk about mission. We use the word purpose. What is the purpose of our organization? Why do we even exist? And out of that, we developed a very simple purpose statement. That our purpose is to make wholesale easy so that you, our customers, can be more successful. So I'd like to think that that is our purpose, and that is also our promise. We're here to make wholesale easy so that you, our customers, can be more successful. And I believe that as we move from today to tomorrow, if we stay close to this statement and honor the spirit of this statement, then we won't go too far wrong. And needless to say, we're very much looking forward to the journey. So with that, thank you all very much. And Charlie, if you want to come back up this way.
Yeah, thank you. We can stand, we can sit down. We're going to take a couple minutes. Yeah, let's stand up. Just to finish this off. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract you standing there. I was very excited to come back up and talk to you. So I just couldn't wait. Quick background. Obviously, you're not from these parts. There's a bit of an accent. You want to tell everyone where you're from?
Sure, yeah, Charlie. I grew up in Ireland, near Galway, west of Ireland, for any of you that have been there. But yeah, nice place.
I have to ask you, when we met, again, so many years ago, and that Stanford graduate student and your colleagues, is this the presentation you envisioned giving one day, do you think, or what would have been different about it?
I don't think we could ever guess, Charlie, that I'd be delivering this presentation here today. I do remember those days very well, actually, and have an affection for you from those days, Charlie, to be clear. But let me say, we were very, very naive.
Yeah.
Very naive.
It seems like it took longer.
It took a lot. Well, one of the things we were so naive about is we thought that transformation would happen so much quicker.
Right.
And I think we underestimated the real hurdles that you had to overcome as a business and through the technology to actually, make that happen. And so we were very naive and didn't fully appreciate the complexities. But I also think we had some fundamentals right in terms of technology was going to fundamentally change our industry. And if you think about the changes that have happened since 20 years ago today, they've been pretty massive.
Right.
So on the one hand, more change than we imagined, on the other hand, less.
Yeah. You said it as you were closing, we didn't do things wrong. I had the good fortune of being part of the faculty on the Auction Academy, and I love talking to the up-and-coming management and the people that are involved in the industry. I always like to say, when we were at Blue Book, before the internet came along, we said, we'll think outside the book. And when I talk to the auction folks, I say, maybe you need to think outside the lane. And the lane was, created efficiency in the marketplace. Yeah. That's why it was created. But then as time progressed, does it create an inefficiency in the marketplace? Now, I just want you to comment on this auction business has been pretty darn good recently. It is doing great. So it's kind of hard to get people too excited about changing the way they're doing things.
Yeah. That is true, Charlie. The lane has been great and, really served a function of how do you get liquidity on a vehicle, and it served the purpose of getting buyers together, the vehicles together, the sellers together. It's been very effective for 50 years. But is that the way the business is going to be done 50 years from now? I don't think so. I think it's going to change, and I think we're already seeing, when I talk about 80% of the off-lease vehicles selling on platforms like OpenLane, when I talk about what we're seeing on backlot cars and platforms like that in terms of the growth and conversion, there is a pretty massive change underway. And I think your expression is a good one, thinking outside of the lane. Like I said, I think the physical infrastructure and physical facilities are incredibly valuable and incredibly necessary in our industry. But I think you've got to figure out how do you fit that together with digital marketplaces in a way that's going to work for customers.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was taking notes as you were talking, and I just write down the two words that always came to mind in any remarketing endeavor, either side, is time and money. So, the less time and the more money is the value or the success. And that seems to be a little bit of a moving target. In other words, if you took what you're doing right now compared to, the 20 years ago when you were thinking of these ideas, I'm sure there'd be a much, higher reduction in time and a larger return on the dollar. But as we progress slowly, I mean, you're still seeing efficiencies, but you're seeing it at maybe at a less remarkable amount, I guess. Is that correct, or?
It's hard to say directly. I guess what you're hitting on is the key drivers, I think, in our industry are maximizing the proceeds in the least amount of time at the least cost. And what is the equation that solves? What's the best way to solve that equation? But I think at the end of the day, obviously proceeds have been extremely strong given tight supply in our industry. But I think time, cost, and I think when we think about proceeds, Charlie, some of what we see with geographic reach, getting the right eyes on the car, those things ultimately become pretty telling in terms of can you solve that equation in the most optimal way.
Yeah. A couple of the solutions that you were offering required some inspection, some degree of expertise. Can you talk a little bit about the source of these technicians nowadays? Is that becoming more difficult to find or develop?
It hasn't been to this point. I think what we're finding, Charlie, is there's a lot of people who have automotive knowledge that might be perhaps a little bit later in their career and don't necessarily want to be under the vehicle anymore, but would like an opportunity to leverage their skills and understanding of what a vehicle is and what a condition of a vehicle is, and get rewarded and compensated for that skill, which is a very, very valuable skill, but maybe do it in a way that's less tough on their body. So we haven't had that as an issue.
When you talk about data, one of the things that comes to mind also is it's kind of a double-edged sword, in terms of it creates an expectation, whether it's the value or something like that the vehicle might bring or not. And I know your consignors always have expectations anyway. At the other side, it can soften the expectation by some real market. And as we've seen the growth of products like inventory management products and things like that some of the dealers are using, can you talk about just a little bit in terms of how you manage data or how you manage expectations based on that type of data?
Yeah, I guess what I'd say, Charlie, is I think data offers this potential to unlock a tremendous amount of value. I will also say that I haven't seen all that many truly compelling examples of that yet sort of unlocked in our industry. I think there are some. We're starting to see some. I thought the example that I shared is one that seems to be very positive. We're working to refine our buyer and seller matching, or I suppose it's really vehicle to buyer matching algorithms to make those more effective. And there's a lot more tools available on that. There's been a lot of investment in data around artificial intelligence and damage detection. Can you, from a photograph, determine damage? And that seems to be a really difficult equation to solve, although investments continue. So I think data will unlock value and is unlocking value, but sometimes as well, I guess, Charlie, the market it's hard to markets are moving so much up and down on value with vehicles. Sometimes it's hard to say, is that just a market effect or is it actually a benefit I got from having more insight on the vehicle?
Right. And you go from the simplicity of day of sale car wash that used to be a thing back many years ago to full again, the reconditioning shop, or just again detailing the vehicle before sale. Once you take it out of a set day and time of sale, I guess a little bit of that goes away. But I was intrigued by what I was seeing in terms of your formulaic approach to reconditioning, body repairs, etc.
I think there's something as well you see, again, which when you have a universe of buyers that's engaging more digitally, and I think we're seeing that on everybody's platform, I would argue, certain sort of cutoff points in condition grade become really important, right? A lot of buyers will say, hey, I'm not going to buy below this grade. I'm not even going to search below this grade. So if the vehicle is even 1 decimal point below that, that buyer is not going to see it. So I think we've kind of learned that, hey, there's some really key kind of breakpoints on the condition scale, and sometimes a small investment to get a vehicle 0.2 decimals up can be really impactful for a seller. And that's a more sophisticated analysis than, a detail in every car,
Right.
right? So that's, I think, you know, an area where data can help.
Yeah, and when the detail occurs, again, if you've made the sale or it's been in an electronic world, maybe, again, it's detailed for delivery rather than for the sale itself in terms of when that happens. What about that? And again, this kind of ties into that length of time that this transition's occurred. You do have buyers, you do have people in our industry that just have to kick the tires, so to speak. We always talk about that. And where are you finding, again, a little bit more flexibility from this crowd in terms of making changes and things like that?
Yeah, you know, I think, Charlie, that was probably the biggest, that has been the biggest question and objection over the years to digital platforms from the very beginning of OpenLane. It's this, I need to kick the tires. It's a very valid request. What it really is a customer asking, how can you give me the confidence that I would have if I were looking at the vehicle? It's not that I really need to kick the tires, but can I have something that's, you know, as good as that? And that speaks to a need to continue to invest in condition reports, right? Which is something our industry is doing. I think it's a need to continue to protect the buyer. When you get that one car that isn't what you thought it was, am I protected? Okay, yeah. So can you serve that need? But the other thing I'd say to that buyer is, I understand your desire, but if that's what you really need, then you are missing out on an awful lot of cars, because all of your competitors are buying a lot of cars where they don't kick the tires. And do you really want to give up all of that inventory and all of that opportunity for your dealership and just let other people buy it, and you're buying what's left at the end of the day? So I think I've been surprised, Charlie, how well buyers, not surprised, I mean encouraged by how well buyers have adopted. I had a conversation with a dealer within the last few months, and his feedback to me was, he said, Peter, I grew up in the auction business. My dad was a dealer. I was a 10-year-old kid at my dad's side in the lane. I love the lanes. I love the lanes. But I have to acknowledge that I'm able to do more, be more efficient, and make more money by engaging in digital. And that doesn't mean I don't love the lanes. I love the lanes, but this way is better for me. And I think we'll find more of that in the future.
Well, I appreciate that. You just, when you develop those vehicle logistics center, will you still have an opportunity for them to win the big screen TV or get the Moose Burger or something like that while they're there?
Well,
So the final question, can you give me an idea on how long? I mean, again, we're progressing, but is there an end in sight, or is it just a natural evolution of the business?
I think it's a natural evolution. And I don't think there's any end in sight. And I think, Vehicle Logistics Center is a physical auction with a digital marketplace on top. But it's a physical auction, and it's, again, as I said, geared to the process and getting vehicles through the process quickly to a high quality, a high consistency, and getting them, moved out to the buyers quickly. I don't think there's an end in sight. I think this whole changing paradigm around how used vehicles are sold to the retail customer is a potentially even bigger change than anything we've seen, and how that sort of plays through our ecosystem, I think, is yet to be fully understood.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and maybe, it's not looking for an answer, but looking for the discussion of the, again, wholesale versus retail, and how this maybe even blends together in the future. I don't know where that ends up. I know the advantages to either or both, but certainly something you're thinking about.
We're thinking about it. Again, if I go back to the purpose statement, it's to enable our customers to be more successful. So if our customer wants to retail a vehicle in the traditional way, if they want to retail a vehicle through a more digital consumer experience, we want to enable and support all of our customers with whatever strategy that is. But I do think that when you look at it through the lens of the consumer, I do think there's more and more consumers that have been conditioned to, the Amazon type purchase experience. And I'm probably one of them, Charlie, that, when I get my next vehicle, and I got one in the last 12 months, I like to do most of that work just digitally and then just go pick up the car. So I think there's tens of millions of consumers like that, and it's growing every day.
Yep. Sure is. Hey, Peter, thank you so much for sharing your vision and for Car's vision, and congratulations on your role as the